Yes, hello. My name is Greg Channon. I'm the Chief Geoscientist of Elixir Energy. My role is to oversee technical programs in Queensland and Mongolia, where we have active exploration and appraisal programs ongoing.
Greg, thank you very much for the introduction. Really good to be talking to you again. I almost didn't recognise you in a plain white shirt. I'm used to seeing you in a Hawaiian shirt, but good to see you again.
Thank you, Merlin. It's good to see you, connecting with you over in the UK.
Okay, so Elixir Energy, obviously, as you mentioned, you've got the project in Mongolia, the coal bed methane in Mongolia. You've also got the grandest gas project in Queensland in Australia. Today, what I'd like to kind of understand more is the work that's going on, or the work that's been done, and the plan that's going forward for the grandest gas project in Queensland, because you had this the Daydream 2 well that you drilled in the end of last year, and now you're moving into test work. The share price doesn't seem to respond. When I look at the news releases, it seems to me as if the kind of the technical data is quite good, but I can't. What's the problem? I mean, why is the share price going down? I mean, I know you're a technical person, but I want to kind of unpick the technical to understand if the share price trend is has got it or hasn't got it.
Well, look, I think I definitely haven't got it there, Merlin. The news has been incredibly good over the last month or so, and look, the share price isn't kind of reflecting the upside that we're seeing in this opportunity. And over the next 2 months, April and May, all is going to be revealed with regard to Project Grandis and the potential of our upcoming Daydream 2 testing program.
Okay, well, let's go back to let's go back to the Daydream 2 well. Can you just kind of talk me through what you found in it? What were the kind of the initial results and the kind of initial observations and conclusions that you drew from that well?
Yeah, look, certainly. So, look, Daydream 2 was drilled back in December of 2023, and we were drilling down to a depth of around 4,200 metres. We were targeting the bottom 500 metres of the well, where we saw Permian sediments, both tight sands and coals, as being the primary targets of the well. Now, as is always the case with these types of opportunities, at around 4,200 metres, we were ready to call TD when we thought we'd just go a few metres more, and we got a very exciting drill break followed by a gas kick in the well. Now, this was most unexpected at those kind of depths. And we had quite a significant gas bubble enter the wellbore, which was subsequently flared safely at the surface. But by doing that, it showed that gas can enter the wellbore and flow at these depths, which was significantly deeper than we've seen flows that don't need to be stimulated. So we drilled on for another 100 metres, and we saw a gross 20-metre section from about 4,200 to 4,220, which appears to have permeability and porosities greater than 12.5%. So we were expecting sub 8% porosity through a lot of these tight sands. They need to be stimulated to flow, but clearly this one doesn't. And that was a really exciting outcome for us at the end of the well, so close to the TD that it could have been missed if we hadn't have just moved on a few more metres. So we drilled in the end to 4,300 metres and certainly exhausted the section there. But in the end, there's something like 600 metres of gross interval, of which we've mapped almost 245 metres of net pay. And we're going to be moving forward.
Yeah, can you just explain the kind of the difference? What is a 600 metres gross interval? Is that from the top of your first bit of net pay to the bottom?
Yes, that's correct. So the gross interval is simply when we first intersect the sandstones or the Permian, and then the bottom of that is, of course, where we call TD. So that was a 600 metre gross interval. Now, within that gross interval, there's sands, there's coals, there's siltstones, and there's shales in this typical fluvial environment. And of that 600 metres, 245 metres was designated net pay by our petrophysicist, who analyses all of the logging and the traces and determines how much of that is net pay.
Just for me and for the viewers, what characteristics are needed to have to be qualified as net pay? Is it a kind of a combination of organic content, gas, and expected flowability?
Yes, well, look, not so much flowability. Actually, that's what we're testing for in this program. But look, firstly, we look for resistivity on the resistivity curve, hydrocarbon saturation. Now, uniquely in this Taroom Trough, all of the reservoirs that we saw are, in fact, gas saturated. So there's no water present that we see on the logs. So we're looking for either coals that have potential to be fractured or stimulated, and, of course, sandstones. And so when we look at the sandstones and the coals and the saturation of the gas, that determines the net pay outcome of around 245 metres.
So you can get sandstones with gas in it, but it doesn't meet a saturation kind of threshold, and so it doesn't get designated as net pay.
Well, if it doesn't have gas saturation, then it certainly won't be. That's right. So we look for a cutoff, I think, of around 50% gas saturation, and all of our rocks well exceed it, which is really important.
That kind of permeable intersection, or that where you got the gas kick at between 4,000 meters and 4,200 and 4,220, and that was not a tight sandstone. Basically, it was a kind of a sandstone with porosity and permeability. Which is that the only one that you found? Was that an unexpected feature?
Yes, well, look, it was. So, look, most of these sands, as I mentioned, have lower porosity, generally less than 8%, and then they're stimulated, and that enables them to flow by injecting fractures into them, etc. But with the case of the permeable sand at 4,200 metres, this appears to be able to flow on its own. And our detailed analysis shows it's not because it had a fracture or a natural crack in it, but because there was preserved porosity and permeability over the geological time that it had been buried. And so it was unusual for this to be at this level, and it certainly wasn't seen in the Daydream 1 well, so this was an additional sand that we didn't see. And look, we've done some subsequent analysis of it, and we've determined that the reason that the porosity and the permeability has been preserved is because the actual grains that make up the sandstone have been coated with clay. Now, this is a phenomenon that is seen around the world, and it's not necessarily unusual, but we've never seen it in this deep in Queensland before. And this clay coating prevents subsequent cementation as the sands turn into rocks. And what we've also noted is that this is very common in parts of the world like the Perth Basin, where, if you're familiar, there are the Waitsia fields, and there's a lot of deep buried sandstones at these sorts of depths in the Perth Basin, which are also producing at very high rates, that only discovered in the last 10 years or so, which are also have this common clay coating. So it's something we see around the world. It's unusual in Queensland, and now we understand why it's there. So it's quite unique and very special.
And the other the other sandstones which are tight, the porosity is filled with cement, presumably.
Some cement. I mean, we don't think there's so much that they'll never flow, but there's clearly a cementation factor associated with it. So these porosities were unique from that perspective between 4,200 and 4,220.
Okay, good. And you mentioned that the Daydream 1 well. Remind me when that was drilled.
Well, that was drilled some 12 or 13 years prior. Actually, it was drilled by QGC, which later became British Gas and now is controlled by Shell. And so that well did flow gas from these tight sands all those years ago, but not at the rate was a peak of 3.5 million cubic feet per day, but the rate wasn't sustained. And so we do point that out, that although 3.5 million cubic feet per day is a healthy rate, it wasn't a rate that was sustained. And so we're looking to test our well and hopefully get some sustained rates, which will build on and hopefully reach a commercial limit in the months and years to come.
And do you think that that's the kind of the key de-risking event? Is that the key de-risking step that will kind of encourage the market to say, actually, this is the real deal?
Yes, I mean, it definitely is. The flow rates that we'll get over the coming 2 months, April and May, are going to be when this is all happening. I think we'll show that the flows will tell the market that this is going to be a significant field and area of Australia for gas production in the future.
And do you know what interval they tested for that Daydream 1 flow test?
Yes. So that data is all recorded with the government, and that's higher than this zone. So it's not the equivalent of this zone at all. The zone that we're seeing in Daydream 2, there isn't an equivalent in the Daydream 1 well. It just wasn't present. As we've gone down dip, although the gross section is broadly similar, it's thickened and it's become cleaner and better quality, which is a little unusual. But anyway, it's been a great outcome for Elixir Energy.
What's the distance between Daydream 1 and Daydream 2?
It's less than 5 kilometres. I would say about 3.5 to 4.
Good. So you're moving into a testing program. You've just put out a couple of days ago. You put out a kind of an operations update, kind of describing the upcoming testing program. It covers Nomgon as well in Mongolia. But let's just kind of can you put it into words? Tell me about the testing program that you're doing in Grandis.
Well, look, the testing program for Grandis has obviously expanded now that we have the permeable sand at the base. So, look, we've broken it down to 6 zones or stages that we're going to be stimulating and testing. And we start our stimulation program from the bottom up. So the first thing we're going to do, though, before the stimulation starts, is that in the next week or two, we're going to be undertaking a series of, we call them DFITs. And they're diagnostic formation, let me just remind me of the third word.
Integrity.
Integrity, thank you. Test. And there are two main purposes of doing those. The first is to get indications of the pore pressure. Now, we do have some broad indications, but we will have some more information from that. And then secondly, we'll get more stress information about the stresses and strains around the wellbore, and they will help us in absolutely determining what the stimulation program is going to be. So, look, it's not a terribly exciting program that happens over the next 2 weeks, but very important from the data that we gather. And then from then, we launch into the stimulation and testing program.
In your first pass, when you talk about the kind of resistivity and the well logs you've got, it's effectively kind of geophysics heavy, isn't it? It's kind of the first pass is kind of a geophysical. I mean, you look at the chippings and the cuttings, but essentially it's a geophysical process. Are these DFITs a physical testing, or is it just a different kind of geophysics?
Well, it's geophysics and engineering, actually. So it's where they kind of come together. We use our the geophysics and all the logs to determine where we're going to place these integrity tests. But then what we do is we do a very small, only a matter of a few gallons of injectivity into the formation, and we watch how it reacts. And so it's very much an engineering tool to understand the stresses and the strains, as well as the pressure of the rocks and the pressure in the pore space, which will guide us as to how we manage and run our future stimulation and testing program.
And you've talked about doing testing 6 zones, and you're probably going to do your I'll stick with the acronym, the DFITs, over those 6 zones, and you're doing permeable sandstones, tight sandstones, and coals.
Yes, that's correct. So really, originally the plan was obviously just the tight sands and the coals, but we've added the permeable sand at the base to it. So that gives us 3 lithological or rock targets that we're going for. When we do our stimulation, we start at the bottom and we come up. So we'll do a zone, which will be, then the first one will be in the bottom of the hole. That will be the permeable zone. We'll stimulate that, then we plug then we move up, we stimulate again, and then we plug, and we'll do that 6 times. And those 6 stages are a combination of permeable sands, tight sands, and coals, sometimes a combination of both. And so we move up the hole until we've stimulated all of those zones. Now, I think it's worthwhile noting now that of the entire 600 gross metre interval from the 245 metres of net pay, only 47 metres will actually be perforated, stimulated and tested. And that's for mainly operational reasons. We can't test every metre in the first well. There are logistical and operational constraints. So we've selected a representative 47 metres, and they will be split over those 6 zones. And then once we've stimulated all the zones, then we drill out the plugs sequentially from the top down, and we start to run flow tests. And we'll flow test the first couple, and we'll sequentially open up. And then finally, when we've drilled out all the plugs, then we'll test all the zones combined. And that will be sort of the ultimate test that we make towards the end of the entire program.
When you select these 6 areas, you talk about kind of representative zones, or your representative suite of samples. You're trying to hit some permeable sandstones, some tight sandstones, and some cold. Do you try to go for the kind of an average of each of those zones, or do you try to kind of get the best result by going for the most prospective part of the tight sandstones?
Well, look, there's a lot of factors are part of the way we select our areas. So, look, I think it'd be trivial to say we cherry pick the best zones. I think that was perhaps what you were trying to ask. So we use the lithologies, we use the stress, the strain, the Young's moduli, which is a representative of the stress downhole. We look at the pressure regime, we look at the resistivities, all of our logs to determine what a range of zones will give us. And remember, this is really an appraisal well where we're trying to learn as much as we can. And so there's an incredible amount of data that we'll be requiring over this 2-month period. And it's as much about acquiring and learning what is happening down in the wellbore as is getting a rate at the end. So we will open up our zones, all our zones at the end for a cumulative test. But at the same time, we just can't test all of those zones, and we'll be learning as we go through all of these zones, and some spots will be sweet spots, others may not contribute as much, and we will have the ability to measure those zones downhole and determine which zones are flowing more and which ones are flowing less. We use production logging tools. There'll be traces, a range of different things that we use to understand that. So as much as it is about what's the flow going to be, this is about getting representative data and learning so that the next well we drill, we can improve and do even more.
What does success look like? I mean, and I know it's a slightly trivial question in the sense that what you're doing is a systematic gathering of data to inform an ongoing exploration program in a 1,000 kilometre square exploration license with lots of potential. But
exactly.
In the eyes of the market, what would success look like? I mean, would it be getting good flow from commercial flow rates from one zone, or do you think the market wants to see commercial flow rates from multiple zones?
Well, look, I think that's not every zone may flow. I can't guarantee that. Time will tell. We won't do every zone individually. We'll do some individually, and then we'll do some overall. I think when we look to what success looks like, what we're looking for is some sustained flow over a period of hours and days. The testing program won't last for months. It's only going to go for a couple of weeks over many zones. And look, I think it's too early to say what the rates might be and what they might look like. But the first indication that we're having success will be that the zones that we do open up can flow in a sustained way and not just, for a minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes and then die off. Bear in mind that in unconventional zones, flows are what we call under exponential decline. So that means that they don't go flat for a number of weeks and then gently drop off. They do fall quite dramatically early on. And that is life in an unconventional reservoir. But after they fall for the first 3 to 6 months, they do reach a stable rate, which is then produced on for many, many years. And that typifies the production profile of an unconventional reservoir. So that would be typically what we look at, but nonetheless, it still is sustained over a period of time, even if it would be falling in the early stages, which is just natural. But of course, we add on to that the potential for a conventional flow, which doesn't decline exponentially. It does decline, but not at the same rate. So we've got to learn what all this means as we go through the program. But I think in the first instance, investors should watch for a flow of gas to surface. I mean, that will be the first indication that we're doing things right. We've already had one, actually, but this one will be under more controlled conditions where we can measure it. One other thing to mention, I could have mentioned earlier, I should have, was that we have had some microscopic gas measurements already of the chromatographic breakdown of this gas. And we're really relieved to see that the CO2 content is down at around 1%. So over in Australia, some of these deep basins can have quite high CO2 content. I think in the Cooper Basin of South Australia, I've seen it up as high as 30%, which is a real issue because you just don't want to be producing and treating and removing that CO2. But in the Taroom Trough, it looks like it's going to be about 1%, which is what we did predicted, but now we have some real evidence that will be the case.
Good. So look for flow of gas to surface and an explanation around the flow rates as it comes through. Jumping around a bit, you've got a contingent resource on the gas, which kind of think dates from 2022. You've also got an unconstrained resource on the coal gas content, and that's kind of broken down into adsorbed and fractured, or kind of gas and fractured.
Yeah.
Gas and fractures.
Yeah, again, Merlin, this was another surprise for us when we were drilling the well. It was our initial expectation that given that the coals, which are the main source rock for all of the gas, most of the gas in the Taroom Trough, and also migrates outward to a lot of the gas fields on the edge of the Taroom Trough, it was our expectation that because the rocks are relatively mature, that the source rocks and indeed the coals would be largely spent of the gas that was originally adsorbed to them, and so it was a little bit of a last minute thought. But when we were drilling the well, we didn't have the opportunity to cut cores because the hole sizes weren't convenient, and of course in an appraisal well we just wanted to get down and get the quality data from the cuttings and the logs. But so what we did instead of cutting a core is that we captured the cuttings at the surface, and we still ran them through a desorption tube to identify if there was any adsorbed gas remaining on the coal. And it turned out that there was a significant amount of adsorbed gas remaining on the coal, and therefore it gives us more indications that via either natural fractures or created fractures that this coal has very significant potential. And if we can identify either fracturing naturally or it can be induced, well, this could offer a very significant resource over a large area of the block. And you've probably seen the actual 2U, which is the prospective resource over the greater area, now I think is up around, I think it was 3.6 trillion cubic feet of gas. So that's a very significant amount of gas, let alone the contingent resource, which is more solid and known to exist in the existing immediate area around Daydream. That's another 400. And of course, if we can show that there's permeable sands as well, that number is going to increase as well. So, I mean, this area has tremendous potential. And look, I know I've heard Neil coin the term a sort of a super. It's a kind of a super gas basin because we've got not only significant resources with us, We've got Santos and Shell actively drilling at the moment. Shell are drilling a horizontal well program to the west of us. Santos have blocks to the north, which will probably drill in the next couple of years. There's a smaller company called Omega immediately to the southwest. They're going to be active this year as well. This is a really exciting region where there's a lot of activity going on, and it's not only in the gas space. We've got Origin active on a carbon capture program. There's a lot of activity in this region, which is really quite unique for Queensland, and it's hard to see that much activity elsewhere in Queensland. In South Australia, it's reasonably quiet. Look, you will see activity in Northern Territory and probably WA, but there's a lot going on in about a couple of 100 kilometres around our block.
It all sounds quite exciting. Just going back to the kind of the coal and the adsorbed gas, when you talk about doing this well test program over the next 3 months, is that going to be analysing the kind of the coal potential? I mean, I know you talk about doing tests on the coal, but will that give us figures on potential flow from adsorbed coal?
Oh, well, look, we certainly hope so. So that will be a part of our plan. And look, there'll be operational constraints around, the coals, et cetera, but it is our intention to identify the potential flow rates from the coals, from the tight sands, and then from the permeable and other zones combined. There will be some operational constraints on that. So if next time I see you, if I didn't get one of those done perfectly, that could be the case.
And when it comes to kind of planning the news flow, I mean, you said that the defects are boring but important. Presumably, that won't necessarily be a news release. It might be, but it might not. But is the kind of the key news about the gas flows and those tests, which will be kind of May, June, and July?
Yeah, that's right. So look, I think there'll be a press release when we start the program, because I think our shareholders just want to know that everything's kicked off and we're relatively on schedule. As I mentioned, because of course there's so much activity in the region, well, there's also a lot of demand on equipment. And so whether it's Halliburton running our stimulation program, or there are other contractors who provide the coil tubing unit or the surface equipment. These guys are all in demand at the moment, and we get in line with everybody else and we try and share where we can. And it's a real chess game to make sure everybody gets serviced correctly. But we're on schedule. The coil tubing rig, which cleans out the wellbore and prepares it for this entire program, is already completed now. That was out there over the weekend. So now the defit starts, followed by the big program. So certainly some exciting time to come. I was going to also mention to you, Merlin, that I've just in the process of completing a 2-minute animation which describes what I've just said with respect to the perforation and stimulation and testing program. So keep your eye out on that in the next week or two. That should be released for the public shortly.
I will do. Greg, thank you very much for the technical update. It's really good to learn more about what the company is doing on the Grandis project. And I look forward to seeing the results over the coming months. Good luck.
Yeah, and thank you for talking with me today, Merlin. It's always a pleasure.